Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's jump ahead in time. It's the middle of 2025. We're 6 months into a second Trump presidency, and something really strange is going on with US-China relations. All that dread we saw in Beijing, it's just gone. And in its place, a surprising new confidence. So how in the world did China go from bracing for an all-out trade war to feeling like it actually has the upper hand?
To really get this, we've got to go back to where Beijing was in late 2024, just filled with a deep sense of dread. I mean, Chinese experts were throwing around phrases like an unprecedented storm. The trauma from the first trade war with Trump was still very, very real.
So that sense of fear, it totally shaped their initial strategy. China's leaders were batting down the hatches, fully expecting the absolute worst was about to come.
You have to remember, their own economy was kind of sluggish, and those memories of the last trade war were still fresh. So the anxiety in Beijing, you could feel it. They were expecting a full-on assault. Huge tariffs, attacks on their political system, maybe even more support for Taiwan. They were absolutely preparing for a major fight.
And just like they thought, man, that storm arrived. And it arrived fast and hard. In just a couple of months, things escalated like crazy. It started with some tariffs over fentanyl, but then boom, came the big Liberation Day tariffs. China, of course, hit back. And Washington, they hit back even harder.
By the middle of April, the pressure was at its absolute peak. The combined tariff rate on Chinese goods hit a staggering 150%. From the outside, it really looked like Beijing was completely cornered, with no obvious way out of this thing.
But then, right as tensions were about to snap, the whole dynamic just shifted. The tables were about to turn in a way that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming.
So against all expectations, the country that was supposed to buckle, China, didn't. They held firm. And instead, to Beijing's total shock, the US blinked first. Suddenly, it was Washington, not Beijing, that seemed desperate to cool things down.
So how did this even happen? Well, it unfolded in a few key steps. After that tariff shock, the US started looking for an off-ramp. An agreement gets signed in Geneva, then there's a follow-up call between Trump and Xi, and somewhere in that process, a realization started dawning on China's leaders. Wait a minute, we actually hold some serious cards here, more than we thought.
Which, of course, brings us to the massive question, why? What changed? Where did all this newfound confidence and leverage suddenly come from?
Okay, so a huge piece of the puzzle is this basic economic difference. In the US, huge tariffs create a supply shock. That means empty shelves, higher prices, things that voters notice immediately, and that's politically toxic in a democracy. For China, it's a demand shock. They just sell less stuff. But their state-controlled system is just way better at absorbing that kind of hit and managing how the public reacts. And on top of that, Beijing discovered it was holding a few other aces up its sleeve. You see, years of work to make their economy more resilient had really paid off. They had control over critical rare earth elements, they had successfully cut down their dependence on American suppliers, and they'd built up trade with other parts of the world so the US market wasn't the only game in town anymore. And this whole new attitude was perfectly summed up in this new, kind of dismissive phrase that started popping up among Chinese scholars in 2025. There is a trade war. So what? I mean, talk about a complete change in tone.
So, armed with all this new confidence, Beijing basically threw out its old playbook. They came up with a completely new strategy for handling the second Trump administration.
From their perspective, they saw a huge difference. They believed Trump's first term was dominated by these ideological Cold Warriors who were deeply anti-China. But his second term? This Trump seemed purely transactional, obsessed with one thing, the trade deficit. So the new approach wasn't about managing his team through back channels. It was about managing Trump himself, face to face.
And the goal of this new approach? It's pretty simple. Keep the deals small and keep them transactional. They're more than happy to make some tactical concessions, agree to buy more American soybeans or whatever, as long as it means they can protect the deep, state-led structure of their own economy in the long run. But, and this is a really big but, just because they're feeling good about the trade stuff, it does not mean they think their problems with Washington are over. Not by a long shot. there's still this deep anxiety lingering under the surface.
At its core, the fear is that this focus on trade is just a temporary phase. They're worried that as soon as a trade deal is signed, the US is just going to pivot right back to more hostile political fights. And those are the fights where Beijing feels it has way less control.
So what are they actually afraid of? It's not tariffs. It's things like a US campaign targeting Communist Party members and their families. It's more American support for Taiwan. It's any US effort to try and drive a wedge between the party and the Chinese people. These are the issues that Beijing believes could send the whole relationship into a dangerous freefall.
And that fear, it leads directly to their core strategy, which is basically this: use the trade talks as a shield. By deliberately dragging out the negotiations, keeping the conversation all about economics, Beijing is hoping to stop Washington from ever pivoting to those political issues they see as so much more dangerous.
And that leaves us with the final, critical question hanging over everything. Is this newfound sense of empowerment a brilliant strategy? A way for China to manage the US and buy itself some precious time? Or is it a dangerous miscalculation, an overconfidence that could end up provoking an even harsher backlash from America down the road? That's the question that both Washington and Beijing are grappling with right now.